at University of Regina and First Nations University of Canada for over 17 years. And I've also worked as an independent curator. The sharing of ideas and knowledge is an intergenerational responsibility, and I'm honored to take part in sharing stories this evening about Indigenous curation. I want to start, however, by acknowledging that this land on which we're gathered, both physically and virtually, is situated on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. As a visitor from Treaty 4 territory, I support the Algonquin people along with Inuit, Métis, and other First Nations peoples who care for all our relations in this region. Thank you to our guests, Leanne Martin, Suzanne Morissette, and Danielle Printup for accepting this invitation to join our curatorial circle this evening. The format includes me inviting each of our guests to introduce one of their curatorial projects, followed by questions generated by students in my Indigenous curatorial course this term. Then we'll open the floor to questions that you might have if we have time at the end. So please put any questions you might have into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and then I can go to those and read those questions off. Without the support of Carleton University Art Gallery, and especially Fiona Wright for facilitating this evening's conversation, we would not be here. Thank you, QAG. And as the Canada Research Chair in North American Indigenous Art and Material Culture at Carleton, I want to acknowledge the support of my chairship in bringing this evening together. This gathering is also part of a larger learning circle in the form of a grad course I'm teaching this term that includes MA and PhD students enrolled from Carleton's Cultural Mediations PhD program, the School of Indigenous and Canadian Studies, the Art History program, and University of Regina's Media, Art and Performance PhD program. We're engaging with concepts around Indigenous curation at an exciting time. How Mayorik is opening this month in Winnipeg, curated by an Inuit curatorial team that includes Krista Ulujuk-Zawadzki from Carleton. And also this month, curator Kathy Mattis received her PhD last week on a topic very close to curatorial issues. Two Indigenous curators in PhD programs enrolled in my course this term, Felicia Gay and Fran Ibert Spence, are on their way to also helping change the world, at least the art world. I'm going to begin now by inviting Leanne Martin, who needs no introduction, but there will be an introduction in the chat section that Fiona will add so that you can read her bio and it won't take time away from listening to what Leanne is sharing tonight, which is her amazing curatorial project that she led in 2017 called the Resilience Project. So I'm going to turn over the floor to Leanne. And so Leanne, if you want to turn on your video and unmute, that would be great.
Okay, are we on?
I can see you and hear you, Leanne.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I'd just like to begin briefly by welcoming everyone, even though I can't see everyone, but and a big thank you to Carmen for organizing this session and inviting all of us, and then to Carleton University for hosting it. And then a very special thanks to Fiona for all your assistance, and especially tonight with showing the images, Fiona. Thank you. So to begin talking about this amazing project, the National Billboard exhibition titled Resilience, I'd like to acknowledge the vision of MAWA, Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, and especially want to thank Shauna Dempsey and Dana Klepke for inviting me to curate this National Billboard exhibition. Shauna called me in the fall of 2016 and said, hey, would you like to, curate an exhibition? It's up to you, whatever you would like. And knowing that I had wanted to work with and show Indigenous women artists for quite a while, that was the theme for this exhibition that was shown across the country in the summer of 2018. And so my enormous debt of gratitude to the 50 artists who agreed to participate and have shown their enthusiasm for the project throughout the process. Well, there were several iconic images that I knew had to be included, but for the most part, the selection of images happened after further research into each artist's body of work, many of whom I didn't really know too well. So I had no themes in mind when selecting the images, except that they had to reflect the resilience and diversity of Indigenous women's art and work well on the large scale builds. So what is resilience? Throughout this dreadful pandemic, one of the words that I have become so sick of hearing is resilience. It has been much overused to mean the ability to recover from and cope with adversity. But I would suggest rather for these artists in the context of this project, resilience is embodied as endurance, adaptability, and sovereignty in relation to customary cultural practices, contemporary identities, the land, and the impact of colonial practices and strategies. Once the task of selecting the images was complete, and as I began to write the curatorial essay for the website, certain themes became apparent. For the sake of brevity in this presentation, I will introduce only one or two images for each of the following themes. Okay, Fiona, first one. Since early colonial times and continuing today, Indigenous women have been dismissed, excluded, and erased. This is a work by Sherry Farrell Rosette titled Ancestral Women Taking Back Their Dresses. It's 1990 gouache and watercolor on paper. Here, Sherry Farrell Rosette interrogates the erasure of Indigenous women artists within the context of Canadian art history. Until very recently, historical works by Indigenous women artists were largely defined as artifact or craft and relegated to museums of anthropology. In the ancestors flying across the ocean to enter European museums and reclaim our rightful matrimony to bring home the dresses. Next. The next theme is the female body. Sexual objectification, discrimination, oppression, violence, and death continue to plague us. Many resilient artists employ photography to critique historical and stereotypical misrepresentations of Indigenous women. And this work by Shelley Nero, titled The Rebel, it was photographed in '92, but it was never shown anywhere until 1989. It's a hand-tinted photograph. And it was one of the iconic images that I knew I was going to include in this billboard exhibition. And here, Shelley poses her mother, June Chiquita Dockstetter, reclining playfully on the hood of a Rebel automobile. Nero's jocular celebratory portrait captures June's femininity and the humor inherent in Indigenous cultures today, while eloquently expressing her mother's confident in her own sexuality and identity. Resilience is also demonstrated in artworks that speak to ongoing racial tensions. Can I have the next one? According to recent census data, well over half of the country's Indigenous population reside in Canadian cities, which are also Indigenous territories. This is Casey Adams' Perception series, Leona Star, 2014 digital image. It's part of her iconic series that tackles this racial rupture in Winnipeg, the city with the largest Indigenous population in Canada. Tired of the many negative and derogatory remarks directed at Indigenous people, Adams' photographic portraits unmask the real people behind the racist labels, challenging viewers to see the true diverse identities of Indigenous people instead of resorting to such one-dimensional racial epithets. And next, Ursula Johnson. Between My Body and Her Words, 2017 is a photograph on vinyl. And Ursula's photograph speaks to the continuing practice of exoticizing and romanticizing Indigenous female bodies. In the style of high fashion photography, Johnson pictures herself in an imitation fringed vest over an Indigenous pattern dress purchased at hipster mall stores. Superimposed over this portrait are Shelley Nero's words, "Our families suffered, small histories disappeared. We continue through our own happiness." And the next theme, and the next image as well, was body of land and water, stewardship of the land, respect for the natural world, and adaptation to change are values that have always characterized the resilience of Indigenous culture. Sonia Robertson's installation, Dialogue entre elle et moi à propos de l'esprit des animaux, expresses a poignant conversation between the artist and her late sister, Diane. This work was created in 2002 and is created from furs and many mixed media. The bones and fur honor the relationship between the Robertson family's fur business in Massachusetts, Quebec, and the animal spirit of the land. And next, Knojuak Ashevak, Nunavut, Our Land, 1992, lithograph on paper. Canada's newest territory, Nunavut, which means our land in Inuktitut, officially separated from the Northwest Territories on April 1st, 1999. Knojuak Ashevak's expansive aerial view, Nunavut, Our Land, provides a telescopic depiction of the abundance of seasonal activities and movement on the land and water in her home territory. Throughout the world, Indigenous nations continue to resist abuses perpetrated by government and corporate interests that view the land and waters as little more than natural resources to be appropriated and exploited. In Canada, Indigenous communities have long led protests against atrocities perpetrated on the land and the water. Next slide. This is Tanya Arnett, Paul First Nation, 2005 Wabanum cleanup site of a 700,000 liter oil spill. It's a detail. 2011, it's a digital print on rag paper. Here, Tanya Arnett laments the actions of that invisible hand of industry in her Scarred Sacred Water series. In this image, Arnett depicts the scene of a cleanup site following a 700,000 liter oil spill at Paul First Nation in Alberta. Community members who were directly affected by the subsequent contamination of their water supply used red food coloring to highlight the polluted area. Arnett exhorts all Canadians to share in taking responsibility for the health of the land and the water, together with Indigenous sovereign nations. And next, Marianne Barkhouse, Dominion, 2011, this photograph. Also on this theme, Marianne Barkhouse invokes and interrogates notions of authority and control in Dominion. Superimposing a quote from the book of Genesis over the photograph of an alpha female wolf, she questions by whose authority humans have received the right to dominion over the earth and all of the animal kingdom. Here, a female wolf becomes of the strength and resilience of Indigenous worldviews, and relationships with nature. And the next theme is bodies of knowledge. Next slide. Customary knowledge informs the cultural beliefs and practices of contemporary Indigenous nations in the present day and into resilience. Artists not only celebrate and reclaim this body of knowledge, but also propose critiques of the many colonial incursions that have attempted to silence Indigenous voices. This is Teresa Marshall, Mi'kmaq Universe, 2005, acrylic on canvas. Here, Teresa Marshall conveys the complexities and continuum of the 6 worlds within the Mi'kmaq cosmology. Marshall asserts that the cultural rupture precipitated by colonial greed and aggression has been mediated and can be shared into the future through the encoded messages and beliefs in contemporary song stories and knowledge. So next is Jenny Williams, Naluyuk Night in Nain, 2016 digital photograph. Sharing the knowledge with our children and grandchildren is essential for bringing each culture forward into the future. Jenny Williams' documentation of community traditions in her home of Nain creates spaces for the sharing of stories and traditional knowledge. This photograph captured an image of the masked Naluyuk intended to both terrorize the community and teach lessons to the children in northern Labrador. Held annually on January 6, Naluyuk Night, or Old Christmas Day, celebrates a Moravian and Inuit tradition. And next, Terry Lynn Williams Davidson, New Jada Octopus Woman, 2017, and its light jet print on dye bond. This work by Terry Lynn Williams Davidson challenges the persisting denial of Indigenous title in Canada through antiquated colonial laws. Photographed as Nah Jada, the artist reminds us that the power of the female octopus is her singular devotion to the next generation. Thus, we need to ensure that future generations commit to the health of the land and the waters of the earth. And next. This is Bodies of the Missing and Murdered. On October, as a theme, on October 4th, 2017, families, friends, and loved ones gathered in community inaugural Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Honoring and Awareness Day. In Manitoba, about 200 people gathered at the legislature building after Nahanni Fontaine, MLA for St. John's, introduced Bill 221 to the Manitoba government in 2016. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And this is an archival inkjet print done in 2016 by Jane Black, a Manitoba artist. And in her red dress project of 2014, Jamie Black installed red dresses in locations throughout the country to evoke presence by marking absence, as a visual reminder of the staggering number of women who are no longer with us. In this untitled work, From Conversations with the Land, Black's body animates one of the red dresses in a dance, reinvigorating the vitality of Indigenous women and their connectedness to the ancestral women and knowledge of the land. And the last image is Mary Longman, Warrior Woman, Stop the Silence. This is a 2017 revision of the original 2014 version, and it's digital media. Mary Longman's powerful image honors the spirits of all the Indigenous men, women, and children who have died for the sake of colonial land acquisition. And although I'm ending on a somber note, the project wasn't meant to honor the victimization of Indigenous women and girls. It's rather resilience is manifested in the art of all these Indigenous women across the country who stand as defenders of their cultural sovereignty and protectors of the land. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. We really appreciate it. Such an incredible project. I'm sure almost everyone can remember encountering at least one of your billboards that's over when it was installed. And it's such a celebratory curatorial project. I agree that resilience is a word that's being overused right now. I drove from Whitehorse to Ottawa that summer that it was installed across Canada. And I took a circuitous route so that I could continually find as many of the billboards as possible. And it's incredible the expansive exhibition space that you created with the project. So thank you for sharing it with us tonight.
Thank you.
I'm going to now turn the floor to Suzanne Morissette. And as was the case with Leanne, Fiona will put up Suzanne's bio so that we won't have to take time from that. Suzanne is here with us from Toronto, and there she is. And I think that Fiona will put up your PowerPoint for you. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Carmen, and to Fiona and the Carleton University Art Gallery for hosting. It's also a really big honor to speak on a panel with you, Leanne and Danielle. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you afterwards. So just jumping right into things, with my 10 minutes today, I thought that I would introduce you to a current project of mine that has grown out of a number of different past explorations, both artistic and curatorial. And I'm talking about a research project that I'm calling for now Indigenous Art and Social Work Practice in the 80s and 90s in Winnipeg. I'm working with a team of research collaborators who, as of today, include Dr. Richard Hill at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, Jamie Isaac, who's at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and Scott Benesina Bambi. And together we will investigate the influence of Indigenous-led social work practice upon concurrent developments in Indigenous art in Winnipeg during the 80s and 90s. Some of you may know that this was a time when Indigenous community organizations were beginning in Winnipeg, and whose advocacy in Indigenous social work practice and policy development have paved the way for really important shifts in child welfare and community development. And so our project will support the sharing of this history, identifying areas of overlap with Indigenous artists, and we'll celebrate the contributions of those who are involved using participatory and community-based methods for creating a visual record. And this is going to include a curated exhibition. So when looking for a place to begin telling you about this work, I found myself thinking about numerous conversations, events, discoveries, and past projects, all of which helped me to understand, as I was prompted for the description of this event, how the work draws upon living knowledges in ways that serve as agents of change. And so one way to begin talking about this, I thought, would be to start in 2017 when I was writing my dissertation up at York. And this was itself a kind of curatorial text about noticing different strategies that artists were engaging, and that I felt challenged contemporary liberal settler society's racial ideas about citizenship, belonging, and relationships to place, and that they were doing so in ways that allowed for more, the imagining of more just futures upon Indigenous territories. And I was nearly finished the writing of that dissertation when my uncle passed away. And Fiona, you can just switch the slide. Unexpectedly, in the days that followed, I found myself thinking about how his life and the life of others in my family had not only made space for me to do the kind of work that I've undertaken with the tools that I have as an artist and arts professional, but they've also provided me with a foundation of knowledge upon which I now build today. And this is a foundation that's not only supportive of the work, but imbues my work with purpose and direction into the future. So as a part of telling you about my current research, it's important for me to tell you about my uncle Larry, who is here in this picture, who was an activist and advocate for Indigenous people, and my father, Vern Morissette, who is also involved in this history. So we can just go to the next slide. Both my father and my uncle were members of the Thunder Eagle Society, along with others such as David Blacksmith, Cheryl Blacksmith, Connie West Buck, Wilfred Buck, and others who together accomplished many things, such as the formation of Children of the Earth High School in Winnipeg, which was one of the first Indigenous schools in Canada. My uncle founded Ojita Pimatsuin Kinamatuin, which was is a social service agency that supports marginalized, at-risk Indigenous young adults and their families. My father was deeply involved in these histories as well, writing policy and programs for organizations such as Mamawe Chiatata. This organization, its name translates in Anishinaabe into the phrase, "We all work together to help one another." And this organization was, in the words of my father from his undated policy work, born from the ashes of a failed child welfare system that acted as one of the many agents towards cultural genocide and the dismantling of Aboriginal family life. So this organization, like many others at the time, formed an important cultural hub and location for related community groups engaging, whose projects were aimed at social change for their immediate communities, but also beyond. Both my father and uncle worked with the universities of Winnipeg and Manitoba to develop capacity within their social work program. And this is work that my father is continuing to do in other spaces as well. But all this to say, the walls of my home growing up and the walls of my uncle's home and the walls of their offices and the organizations where they worked, this is where I grew up, we were always covered in artworks, some by Indigenous artists whose names we might recognize today, and others who are still relatively unknown to a broader audience. And next slide. So 2 years later, after these sort of early ruminations about family and the foundations of that knowledge, I was still thinking about these things when I published a curatorial essay for the Capilano Review just before the birth of my daughter Aspen. And in this text, I was thinking about ideas of family and community and knowledge production and sharing. In this piece, I was drawn to look back at the works of artists who have engaged in similar practices of looking with their families to investigate value from a place of personal and political consciousness. Next slide. One example that I wrote about in that essay was this work by Peter Morin, and this work is called Peter Morin's Museum. I was drawn to this museum work for many reasons. In this piece, Peter created a museum within a museum. And in doing so, it rejected many of the conventions of display related to the white cube with a manifesto that outlined the etiquette of space. According to the manifesto, it's a space of laughter, of shared food and drink. It's a space for children, for community belonging, and for Indigenous knowledge, among many other things. And this project granted agency to objects as teaching tools and as active participants in the transmission of knowledge. In Peter Morin's museum, he writes, "The objects are philosophy. The objects are the organized structures which support the transfer of Tahltan knowledge. You have to read the objects in order to understand Tahltan history." And so I invited Peter a while ago to discuss this project during a speaker series that I organized at OCAD University, where he explained how the walls of his mother's home are filled with photographs of his family. Like probably many of your family hallways were covered with those photographs. And Peter was telling me about his mom, and if she likes you, she'll give you a tour and tell you about the photos. And so I imagined how accessing these stories is a matter of learning about all the things that matter to her, his mother, from her perspective as a Tahltan person, as a mother, as a relative, and a friend to many. And this is information which is prioritized and privileged in Peter Morin's museum. From this, I understood Peter's mother to be a revered teacher, one whose tutelage must be earned in order to gain the particular knowledge of space and time which she offers as a mother, partner, relative, friend. Perhaps this is something that many of us are familiar with from our families, where the setting of this knowledge transmission remains contained within the space of the home and is reserved for only those who are invited to enter. And I think we might even take these things for granted. I'm curious about, why that might happen. So for this museum, Peter borrowed those photographs for his exhibition, for his museum, and he invited his mother to provide a curator's tour of the photos during the exhibition. By privileging something that's commonly intended for smaller select audiences within the context of the home, Peter both invokes the space of home in the gallery while elevating the knowledge that his mother has to offer as important and valuable as a source of material for understanding Tahltan history and knowledge. So on the next slide, Fiona. Thank you. Another way of telling this story would be to begin by showing you some artwork of my own. And this is a series of new drawing-based work from a series that I've called Places I Have Witnessed Knowledge. And I think that this series was about looking for a place to begin by acknowledging all that has influenced and shaped my own perspective in the roles that I now take up in my personal and professional life. This is a depiction that where I come from, which is all about relationships and that are those that are lodged in the land in particular kinds of ways. So just to go over like one or two, an example, the drawing that is top center here is an image of aspen trees viewed from lying on the ground in the grass, watching them blow overhead in the wind. And it's a drawing that I was working on while I was pregnant with my daughter, and into which I mark my own childhood memories of wonder and awe for all that which I could not yet comprehend. And that knowledge I understand is located in the aspen tree itself, not in a particular place. So it's an experience and understanding of beauty and knowledge that I cannot see or logically comprehend, that I continue to mark when I encounter aspen trees with their leaves dancing in the wind. In another drawing, the first one in the second row here, I have drawn the prairie grass where many of my ancestors now rest. It's another image, the last one on the second row. I've depicted the site of an atrocious history from my family and reclaimed that moment in the name of knowledge and love that my family forged in those places. So I'm only mentioning a few of these drawings here just in the interest of time, but I wanted to show this work today to talk about how it brought me back to question again and again how the things that influence the way we see and create also provide evidence of the values and priorities that we bring to this work. And so I'll just talk about the last slide, Fiona. So looking back to look ahead then, coming back to the Indigenous Art and Social Work Practice Project, this is a research project that is about understanding where we come from within a deeper and more attuned knowledge of the interrelationships and ideas that converge across disciplines and communities. As a scholar and educator, I am genuinely concerned about the project of inclusion for Indigenous art, especially when Indigenous art is factored into previously exclusionary centers of knowledge without consideration of the knowledge that it has always represented. And that might look differently than that which has been or which is currently valued in art circles. The curatorial researchers on this project are all intimately aware of the need to undertake this research because we have our own family and community ties to this history. So for myself, it's my father, Vern Morissette, and my uncle, Larry Morissette. For Richard, it's his mother, Elizabeth Hill. And for Jamie, it's her mother, Elaine Isaac, and her grandmother, Dr. Elder Mary Corshane. These connections are just the beginning, and I'm really excited to be at this stage of something new that is different than some of my past curatorial projects, and that feels like home. It's not a project of bringing forgotten histories into the canon of knowledge, but rather of shining a light on the work that has always been there and centering in its own right. For me, this is a significant move. By working with community members who were involved in the history of Momaway and related community service organizations in the 80s and 90s, we will visualize and disseminate knowledge about the relationships and influence of social work advocacy upon contemporary Indigenous art. And so because of COVID, we've had to pause on some of our short-term goals. We are sort of shifting gears a little bit to reorient our plans, but we're gearing up to begin some interviews with individuals who are involved in this history and to begin creating an archive of photographs, interviews, texts, and ephemera. And so the exhibition, which will result from these investigations, will make a contribution to this need for critical new forms of scholarship on Indigenous art by linking Indigenous-led activism in Winnipeg during this time in which we're studying, and Indigenous-led research creation activities in contemporary art. I'll pass it over to you, Carmen.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. What a powerful and empowering, intimate history and visual storytelling project this is. Thank you so much for sharing with
Thank you.
us tonight. I'm going to now turn over the floor to Danielle Printup. Danny and I had the great opportunity to work on one of Carleton's Indigenous Bundle projects this past year, where we included Jeff Thomas as our knowledge keeper. And it was such an amazing opportunity. And so it's so nice to see Danny's face again, because we worked on it for over a year. And Danny, I'm going to let you share one of your exciting new projects with us. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. Kwe Kwe, Skanoge. Thank you for being here. Chimigwech Carmen for the invitation to be on this panel, and Miigwech too, Fiona, for all your work on this event and doing my slides. So I'm Danielle Printup. Most people call me Danny. I am Algonquin and Onondaga from Kitigan-Ziibi and Anishinaabeg. My mom is from Oswego, so I come from that community as well. And I'm also of the Beaver Clan. I currently work as the programs assistant at the Carleton University Art Gallery and have been doing arts administration last several years, and work as an independent curator as well. Being both Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, I bring both of those worldviews and intellectual traditions with me into the work that I do. And I'm learning how to do that better as I go along. It's a continuous learning process. So next slide. So I thought it would be fun to talk about an upcoming project that I'm currently working on called Future Rivers Film and Video from the Desert River. That's going to be opening this summer at the Carleton University Art Gallery starting on June 6th, and is going to feature a selection of work made by Algonquin filmmakers from Kitigan-Ziibi. All of the images in my presentation are stills from the works. So even though it's scheduled to happen, during a pandemic, I think it's still going to be pretty wonderful. And we are doing an online iteration of it as well. I think film is a medium that everyone is engaging with right now, so it's very timely that way. This is actually my first time doing an exhibition of film and video work. And it's also my first time doing something that is so community specific, where I have this strong insertion and relationship to this project with it being, my home community. And I'm realizing what that means as I move through it. I feel very fortunate that there are these films that I can present and highlight my community this way. All of the artists communicate so powerfully through this medium and explore nuances, complexities of Algonquin Anishinaabeg. So next slide. Future Rivers, as the title points to our relationship to water, rivers specifically. For thousands of years and still today, we create our own vessels and move with the rivers. Before the 417, we used the rivers to get around, and every time you would travel somewhere by canoe, you would always return with a new story. And Pinook Smith, who some of you might know, who he's an incredible artist and canoe maker from Kitigan-Ziibi, shared with me that whenever people would see someone approaching land in a canoe, they would be so excited because it meant that they would be bringing a new story. So I've been thinking about the history of storytelling and how these rivers allowed us to keep making new stories, and how that closeness and relationship to rivers was our survival, especially in terms of our creativity. And so I think that there is a special relationship between Algonquin Anishinaabeg and the medium of film, because it allows us to presence and ground ourselves through continuous movement. And so is able to capture our desires to keep creating and keep traveling, so that we can keep making new stories. And I wanted to position this exhibition in relation to our histories of story making. And, that really is a part of the history in this territory, the Ottawa region. And when I think about all the canoes, in the museums that we can go see, I just wonder where all those stories are that would have been connected to them. I don't know them, and, they're not listed or recorded with the canoes, but I do know that the ability to weave and create new story from circumstance will always be there. And so that's, what I wanted to highlight, especially with these artists in this selection who are putting KZ on the map. Many of these films have screened at different film festivals nationally and internationally and have gone on to win awards. So I'm very excited to be presenting their works. Next slide. So right now, I am currently engaging in conversations with different community members and knowledge holders from Kitigan-Zibi. With this being a community exhibition, I felt it important for it to be grounded in cross-generational voices from people who have lived experience from there. Because of the pandemic, they have been virtual visits, and I've only done a few so far, but in the few sessions that I've participated in, I've already learned a wealth of knowledge about KZ that I didn't know before. I had lived there when I was younger for a few years, but I didn't grow up there. And even if I did, there would still be so much that I don't know. So really a part of this exhibition is me connecting to my community, via these stories and learning about my community through visiting. I am very lucky that people have been so generous and are able to share what they know, and to have an opportunity to present an exhibition where the research is me learning the social, political, and cultural histories of KZ. And that visiting and connecting to others through conversation is an important research methodology, for myself, but for many others in the field. And prior to this, in anticipation for this exhibition, I did do research at the Museum of History in Gatineau, and also research material from the National Museum of Denmark, as well as the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia. I didn't travel to those places. They just scanned a crap load of files for me and sent them to me. But I was, through that research, I was able to see, how talented and creative my people are. But every time I do that type of research, I always walk away with more questions that can't be answered, or I get mad at how the ethnographer characterized something. It's oftentimes a very difficult process for myself to do as an Indigenous person. And so, by comparison, researching by connecting to people is like much more generative and, just more fun. It leads to, many different things and people, and I'm able to learn so much more that way. Where I'm learning through relationship building at the same time. So next slide. Jenny Tanasco, who works at the school in KZ, recently told me about our community's unique relationship to filmmaking and how for years ethnographers and videographers from NFB and CBC would come to KZ and record quote unquote Indians on camera. And they would try to document how we lived in the bush, amongst other things. And you can actually find some of these films online, and people like watching them because we can see our relatives in these films. But most of what was recorded was completely contrived, and problematic. And the people from KZ would be told what to say and what to do, and so had little agency in how they were represented. Being in close proximity to Ottawa, KZ is about an hour and a half away, opened it up for those kinds of interactions. And that's a whole history that I didn't even know about, and wouldn't have unless I engaged in these types of, on the ground research, visit conversations. And by connecting with amazing people from my community, I'm able to connect to those histories, which are themselves, living community knowledges. that aren't written down or recorded that way, but are knowledges that are shared amongst relatives and friends and community members. And for this particular project, these conversations are adding so much meaning and shape to just how I even think about this exhibition, and bring me closer to understanding and connecting to my own community through these living knowledges. Next slide, please. So I see this selection and presentation of work as being counter to that history of misrepresentation when our relatives, were told what to do on camera. And by amplifying the work of Algonquin artists from this territory, I'm able to amplify that visual sovereign space that the artists are creating for themselves behind the camera. Now that we're telling our own stories in our own ways, the possibilities are endless. And showing this type of exhibition on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory is important for many reasons, one of which is that we don't have control and agency, over our traditional territory, but we can have control over how we represent ourselves through the visual. And we can affirm our sovereignty through the creation of narrative, our use of aesthetics, and so many other facets that come from within our culture and onto the screen. I'm constantly impressed with what Indigenous artists are able to do with the moving image. Next slide. And how they are able to use medium and speak from within it. Barry Barclay, who is a Maori filmmaker, wrote about the interiority that goes into Indigenous filmmaking. And he refers that interiority to the philosophical underpinnings that shape and inform the work, and how it's a relationship between those interior and exterior elements that become embedded in every nuanced layer. And with this type of focused exhibition, I want to explore those cultural subtleties in those layers, because when you're Anishinaabe, you're operating from a different frame of reference, a different way of seeing and connecting to the world. So I'm thinking about these works through the ideologies that inform their making, because there are so many elements that I pick up on when I watch them. For instance, the built-in reflection, within the narration, the inclusion of ritual, the structure of the story, having roundness. There are so many elements that feel deeply familiar. And so I'm currently thinking through those subtle layers, and by doing that, thinking through those inherent connections within the story, the connections between individuals, relatives, land, memories, imagined spaces, and the unseen and non-human, which we can see here in this image from Char's film, which is a documentary called Mommy Goes Race. The film explores her being the only female race car driver in the community, and goes through what racing means to her and how she wants to be a positive role model for other women. It's quite a tender portrayal. She uses imagery and narration in very affecting ways that illustrate her love and passion and self-empowerment. It's one of those films, that just feels super niche when you watch it, and just resonates with you, especially because you can see and get a sense of her relationships in action, her relationships to others in the community, to the sport, to herself, and especially to her kids, who are so prominently featured in the film. And she draws upon those intimacies in the relationships and connections. When you're watching it, it feels like those intimacies are guiding the weaving of that story. So next slide. Part of what I'm planning to do is explore these works more deeply with the artists. And a component of this exhibition will be creating a podcast with the artists that will roll out during the runtime of the show. I've never done a podcast before. It seems fairly straightforward, but as nervous as I am, I'm so much more excited to be able to chat with the artists directly, learn more about them as individuals, their histories as artists and visual storytellers, and explore their works with them through conversation. I think it will add a great dimension to this exhibition, you know, and also allow for the show to have a stronger connection to community, since I am planning to air the podcast on Sequay Radio, which is the community radio station back home in KZ, who said they could broadcast it no problem. So I'm very excited for it to be aired live on their radio station, and for the show to have, you know, this community context, you know, since this is where the work is coming from, right? 5 out of the 6 works were made in KZ. So I think it's important to have a presence and connection there. But the podcast will be available for the public as well. So don't worry about missing that. So yeah, next slide. Yep, so Future Rivers, film and video from the Desert River, June 6th. Please stay tuned. And that's all for me. Yahweh Goa, Chimigwech.
Chimagwech, Danny, thank you so much. It's amazing that you're talking about this project, which at the same time tonight, we're learning through cross-generational visiting as well. With this darn COVID though, we can't sit down and enjoy tea together, but we're doing the best we can. Thank you so much for sharing this project. I can't wait to see it and to listen to the podcast as well. I want to now ask the panelists to all turn their video and sound back on. And we have three members from my class that are going to ask some discussion questions. And we're going to begin, I want to begin by inviting Felicia Gay, Swampy Creek curator and PhD student from Regina, to ask a question of our panel. I'm not sure what I have to do or to invite Felicia in, or Fiona, do you do that? Oh, there she is. Great.
Hi. I was just figuring out my camera. Oh, it was really great hearing from all of you, and so pleased to hear about your projects, and already had my mind percolating. Anyway, I have a question for all of you. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So considering your experiences working as curators within and also outside of the institution, such as galleries, how can other Indigenous curators implement concepts of care for each other? So what are the most pressing issues that Indigenous curators, especially women, are facing because of the current reconciliation industry in Canada? Does anyone want to take that? So the basis of the question was sort of around kind of current discussions amongst curators about, you know, there are these concepts of care when we're talking about our audiences, especially when we're talking about difficult knowledge and those types of things. But what I'm kind of asking is like what are ways in which we can also care for each other within the institution?
I can start. Thank you for your question, Felicia. I will add, I mean, we can talk about this event as being one example, I think, of the kinds of ways of bringing together emerging mid-career established people to talk about contemporary practices and concerns, but also through practices of co-curating, co-authoring, working together as much as possible to implement care through the facilitation of discussions that I think take place outside of the expectations of institutions. And I think the spaces that have been made for Indigenous curators to work within institutions is growing. You know, those experiences are have led to some really incredible work over the last few years. It's been my experience that the expectations that those institutions have of Indigenous arts are not always as supportive and caring. And so I think implementing these kinds of structures of support, intergenerational support, are extremely crucial. But I guess, you know, in my own work, I often think about how I can bring in the work of others who are doing the kind of things that complement and support what I'm thinking about. But, you know, those are ways to do things when you can't physically have people there beside you. But yes, also bringing your pals in physically and taking up space together and talking about the ideas that are meaningful whenever possible, whenever this COVID thing ends. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, Indigenous peoples are very talented at creating the space that we need for each other. You know, uplifting, supporting one another within our personal networks, within our extended networks as such. I've noticed a big part of just being an Indigenous curator. You know, one of my first experiences was going to the ICC collective in Montreal in 2014 and just being blown away by the amount of panels, discussions, support that Indigenous curators had, right? And that's something that we've always been able to do. I haven't ever felt not supported, you know, by my network that way. And I'm very lucky that I exist that way, you know, in this space. And, you know, in relation to the second part is on reconciliation, right? Like dealing with this whole industry. I mean, that in itself is like a multifaceted issue, right? And I can kind of only speak for myself and how those kind of narratives, that industry makes me feel. So it's hard to think about what other Indigenous curators are experiencing, you know, on the ground, on the front lines, you know, doing the work. You know, it's an ongoing, you know, problem. You know, we've all probably have experienced it as institutions and galleries have been, you know, putting reconciliation into their mandate, you know, hiring more Indigenous people, doing projects and programs. You know, of course, we all know that it's not a project or program, right? It's something much larger, something deeper. I think we all tackle that in the work that we do and care for each other so many different ways. You know, the ICC, they're phenomenal in the workshops that programs they do to help support care and help create it too.
Yeah, I agree completely with, you know, what both Suzanne and Danny have said. And I just wanted to point out too, that about caring, being a seasoned curator as I am, when I first got into this whole business years ago, there weren't very many of us, so there wasn't really that great opportunity to have the community care around you. And I'm really heartened to see the fact that it has grown so much, and the, you know, the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, the, you know, events such as this, so we can all share, are so important in developing that community of care, because heartening to see.
Thank you, Felicia, for asking your question, and thank you so much. The whole notion of care is so important. We've got this sense of network and support. Oops, I've got to start my video. Sorry about that. And I have, I'm so lucky to have a really incredible grad class this term with such astonishing students. And I also want to invite another of our students to come up. Francesca Iber-Spence has a question for you as well. So I'm going to ask Francesca to enter our discussion. There she is.
Hey, sorry, I showed everybody my cat. So hi, thank you so much. You guys offered up to this point is like super amazing. I realized that the question shared with you guys earlier in the week was originally phrased as, is canon building a worthy exercise for Indigenous curators? But specifically, like what I'm curious about is, what does building a canon, or like what does a canon itself look like from an Indigenous perspective? Like obviously like all community specific amongst us, but especially because each speaker here is institutionally affiliated to different degrees, either like within universities or as independent curators, or also in, as Leanna put it, seasonedness. So interested to hear what your thoughts are. Do you want to go first, Suzanne? You're
I
unmuted.
can, but I was a little bit hesitant because I thought Leanne might be ready to speak. I think about this question a lot. Francesca, thank you so much for asking it, and it got me thinking further about, I mean, initially I was thinking about whether it was a worthy exercise to think about canons. And so I guess it made me think about a book manuscript that I'm just finishing up, and very briefly I could just let you know that I'm curious about the development of recognition-based politics in Canada with liberal inclusionary politics in the arts. So, you know, there's this very important history by which Indigenous artists and arts professionals have found their way into the spaces that we now occupy today. And a lot of this has been thanks to the work of people like you, Leanne, who've made curatorial and policy work in this area that's so critical to ensuring the space for an understanding of Indigenous inclusion moving forward. In my book, I'm thinking about what it means to be included, and you know, I'm nervous when I see Indigenous people being brought to the table without necessarily a meaningful commitment to hearing those voices. And so I'm curious about inclusion as the end game for Indigenous arts. I wonder what else might be necessary in terms of taking a next step, and what does truly just relationships look like in that way. And so I guess I've been tending to think about it like being a bit skeptical about the idea of inclusion. And I wonder how centers of knowledge that have always been predicated upon exclusion, particularly race-based exclusion, but certainly other sort of axes of social location influence that exclusion. And so I wonder about the capacity to grow other understandings or measures of value if we need to center Indigenous knowledge itself as its own thing, rather than entering into previously established canons of knowledge. So I think about that a lot. I'd be really curious to hear what you think, Danielle and Leanne.
Skeptical as well. You know, when I think of like the idea of the canon, you know what I mean, seems like a very Western colonial concept to apply to Indigenous art making. That doesn't seem like it would uphold the, you know, integrity and expansiveness of what, you know, Indigenous art is. Like, how do you fit something that's, you know, thousands of years, you know, legacies that go back thousands of years into, you know, something to make it fit? I don't know what that canon would look like and what that would mean. You know, but a canon of Indigenous curation would be extremely, you know, so interesting and relevant, you know, for myself specifically. A canon of Indigenous art writing. Like when I think canon of Indigenous art, it just doesn't align with, you know, how I think and feel about Indigenous art making. But I'm interested in other canons. And, you know, I share Suzanne's sentiments about, you know, Indigenous inclusion and what this canon could mean for that. So.
Okay. How do I make the screen larger here? Fiona.
Yeah.
Fiona, how can I make my screen larger here?
Which screen are you referring to?
Me talking.
You talking? You could go into view in the top right
Okay,
on speaker view.
yeah, okay. Got it, thank you. I was on the wrong view. No, I just wanted to say, because, you know, when Suzanne was talking about, you know, this trying to be wary of looking at race-based inclusion and so on, and just, you know, what that means, and about a canon of Indigenous art. When I began in this field many years ago, I think the most pressing need for me, as for many artists, there weren't many curators, but for many people of us in the Indigenous arts business, was to address inclusion. I mean, it was all about being excluded. So it began as this discussion about being included. And it's progressed considerably, as you know, since then. And we weren't so much, I think, didn't have the nuances of what that practice meant. And I think that in the, you know, in the years since, with the, you know, the younger generations and newer philosophies and theoretical practices, it has become more apparent of what that inclusion means. And I think one of them is to be very cautious about developing a canon. We don't know what that looks like. As you know, Danny said, we don't know if we need one. We don't know what that really looks like yet. I mean, there's still, I think we're still in our infancy here. We need more discussion, more scholarly debate about it. And so that's my piece of mind on that.
Yeah. To clarify, I don't mean like the canon.
Mhm.
I do think like we've been inherently creating one. Like even your exhibition with Mawa builds a canon of Indigenous art, or like an understanding on, and we do tend to return to like the same artists or the same folks, and we have a lot of non-Indigenous curators who are watching what we as Indigenous curators are doing. And so as like what Danielle's doing, or what Danny's doing, by like curating individuals from her community, Suzanne as well, like this very specific accessing of community knowledge, I think when we think of canon, we think of exceptionalism. But I'm really interested in the values as we're selecting work and as we're creating these languages, to be something that's more home-based and that we have to locate ourselves within. So it's more spread out, not a pyramid. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran, for that. And I completely agree, because here I am leading a team project to create you know, a sort of a new way of thinking about and looking at the art of Norval Morrisseau, the Mishomis, the grandfather of contemporary Indigenous art. So I am very much cognizant of this notion of canon and what that means. I love the idea of a canon of curation as a way to think about it. But this idea of past, present, future, and changing the way we think of time challenges those notions of canon making, I think, for sure. With one more large discussion question, and then I will start reading questions from our audience, because there's a number of them there already. And I'd like to invite Natalie Cross, here she is, to ask her question. Thanks, Natalie.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this really important and discussion. It's been an honor to hear about your projects and also from you specifically. So I was wondering, can you please discuss, we've been speaking a little bit about it this evening so far, but can you discuss the significance of networking and relationship building to your curatorial practices?
I'll begin. I can't say enough about, you know, networking and those building those relationships. I mean, I talked earlier about the importance of events such as this, discussions, conversations with artists, with curators, with scholars in our field. And I think for me, I've really benefited from very close colleagues to discuss various projects, dilemmas, issues. And what I found too in curating was co-curating. So important, so important to have not only at a very simplistic level to have that other person or persons to bounce ideas off, but it's also to bring that wealth of knowledge and perspectives that you as a little lonely individual may overlook, may not know. And so co-curating in my career has been very good in building those relationships, because once you're working with artists that you may not have worked with before because of your co-curator, you're you know, maybe developing new ideas for projects and so on. I mean, it's just it's enormously important.
Yes, I, think that I wouldn't be here operating in this capacity without a relationship to a personal and extended network. I'm very thankful for all of the insight and support. Even Leanne was my, first mentor for a project that I did at A Space Gallery. That mentorship really helped guide me and, was my introduction to this field. And I know so many lovely individuals that are so generous and so giving, that are, willing to, hear my ideas, talk about things with me. Every project I've done, I've discussed it with my network at different stages. Like even the project I presented today went through some different, thinkings and rethinkings, and that's, how Indigenous peoples co-create knowledge together, and that's how we shape ideas together. And I wouldn't be here without that.
I think I'll just add, I guess, by saying that when I first started doing this work, I was really shy and I got really nervous about getting to know people. So I remember how hard it was for me to go out and meet others. I entered into this curatorial profession, I think, not really realizing how much of the work would involve me hosting people. And that's quite funny for me to think about looking back. But in those early days, I really valued the support that I received from people who are working in the field, people like Kathy Matties, like Jenny Western, in Winnipeg, who brought me in and pushed me to be vulnerable and think about ideas in new ways. And this is how I got to know people and connect with folks. And I was very lucky that I had those supportive people near me who saw me and who wanted to do that for me. So I guess speaking again for caring for others when doing this work, I think that's another example to Fiona's earlier question. I think about how to build friendships and connect with people based on their ideas and their work. And I think this, of course, takes time. It can't be rushed. It can't be planned. And for somebody like me, that's really hard because I'm a real planner. But not everybody is a close friend either. And so, sometimes things even go sideways, and those relationships are also really important. I try to think about how in each of those, I guess, moments we're caring for ideas together, and I think about what I can bring in to support that care based on the skills and knowledge that I have.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thanks for asking your question. And yeah, networking is at the heart of it. I remember when I just started teaching at what was then Saskatchewan Indian Federated College that became First Nations University of Canada. And my department head and great friend and mentor, Bob Boyer, said to me, "Oh, I booked you a show." And I said, what does that mean? He said, "You're curating a show at what was then the Rosemont Gallery." And, I hadn't even thought about anything like this at all. And all of a sudden I was running around Regina. I was new to, had moved back to Regina. I was meeting people. I was working with people. I was asking for help. And I was intimidated by Bob, who was working with Leanne on these national exhibitions. So it really, although I was flying by the seat of my pants a lot, it required me to make some really good connections quickly. And luckily things after that show got a little better. And people like Sherry Fowler-Rosette was there to hold my hand so that we could do things together, which was a much nicer way to think about curatorial than being all alone, that's for sure. I wanted to just ask on behalf of some of the people that are in the audience, a couple of questions that are here. There's one by Elaine Bernadotte. She says, Quay from Quebec City, Wendat Territory. What are the current stakes of Indigenous peoples' representation? And how can non-Indigenous museum experts engage? Does anybody want to weigh in on that? I think about the DRC as well. Oh,
No, I don't quite understand. What are the stakes? I guess I'm not really understanding.
What are the current stakes? I'm not sure about that part of the question, but can we talk maybe about how non-Indigenous museum experts can engage in relationships, relation building with Indigenous curators, maybe?
Yeah, I guess, do a call for invitations or, put together an advisory or council to maybe propose an invited curator to do something at your space. Certainly engage with the local Indigenous community whose territory you're on. Just be prepared to do the work, I guess. It's not a one-off, right? It's a commitment. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering that question.
Well, I'll ask another question because we have several here. Or Suzanne, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just have a maybe, I hope, quick thought on that. I mean, I don't know that I can list the stakes as a whole, but for me at least, I keep thinking when I'm working on shows about different, what are the perceptions of Indigenous people that influence how our work is received. And I think that for me, that's a really big part of the work that I do is thinking about that and how museums and galleries can respond to not only the issues that artists are bringing in, but how to make those voices known beyond their doors and to speak to not just the inclusion of those voices in those galleries, but to think about how art and society go together and how art is a part of that society. It's a much broader conversation. So I'll maybe just leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I have a question for you, Leanne, from a member of my class, Jonas, who's here in the class, but he lives in Whitehorse. So here you go. How early in this project did you imagine there would be more than 150 billboards and 50 artists? And he's also interested in the project of how you sought your artists.
Okay. No, I didn't see, it was actually 170 billboards. And that's a whole conversation about how the billboards and the images were connected and were selected and then connected. But it was in the fall of 2016 that Shauna Dempsey called me and asked me if I would curate an exhibition for Canada's Confederation. What was it?
150th?
Yeah. And and she said that MAWA was applying for this grant from the Canada Council, especially for projects that year. And so, no, I suggested that I'd like to do the exhibition on, they wanted to do National Billboard exhibition, that's it. And so I said, well, I'd like to do it on Indigenous women artists who had been long excluded, and this would be a good way to promote some of this work. So, excuse me. So we applied for the grant in 2016, got it in 2017, wanted to do the project instead, and I'm doing a hurry up version of this, wanted to do it instead in 2018 because we didn't want to be part of the whole Canadian Colonial Confederation celebration. And so we decided on 50 artists because there was a budget to do that. And selecting the artists was the best part of it. Working with the artists is always the best part of it. And many of the artists, I mean, I think I indicated in my talk that I had in mind a number of images that I knew I wanted to show on the billboards, and spoke with the artists. Everyone was very enthusiastic about it. There were a number of artists, especially the Inuit artists. Of course, it's not my area of expertise, and I did a lot of talking with Heather Igloliorti about that. She was very helpful. And then just speaking with artists on their own through, I mean, I didn't do studio visit. It was all, done virtually. And just talking to them about the project, and finally deciding on which of their images to use that they wanted to represent themselves within the context of resilience. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. We have time for one last question, and I'm going to read out Maya Wilson Sanchez's question. Maya, good to see you here. Danielle and anyone else, can you speak more to accessing knowledge and doing research through institutional archives and through community? How do both of these practices contribute to your curatorial practice?
Wow, yeah. I think the archive, going to those collections, is a good first start. Oftentimes it's like I start with one intention, but then I get led down, a completely, new area. For this, they complement each other, because a lot of, I think I mentioned that a lot of the stories and knowledges, that live with the objects are not, I don't have easy access to, at least with my nations. And then so, I have to go to where the knowledge lives, is where it, which is in the minds of the people, and, connect with my cultural center and ask, hey, do you know anyone that might know this? And, have a budget to be able to spend on paying those people for their labor and contributions. And I find they complement each other in that, those knowledges are, depending on who your family is, depending on your connection to your community. I mean, I don't always have access to certain things, right? And I'm someone that is so curious, and I want to go to collections, and I want to know more. And I also don't want to overburden my family, with these questions or seeking this information out. So I go to my community and just ask around, really. We know who knows what, and who's the best person to talk to about certain things. So it's really quite, they work with each other, I find. I feel like it's important to go visit, with these objects, and to see them and to touch them, with your hands, but then to also connect to people, from your community. Both, are instrumental to me.
Suzanne, did you want to add anything about your current project?
Sure. I mean, I can't, well, first of all, hi, Maya. I can talk probably more about working with community. Institutional archives haven't factored in too much to at least this recent project, but maybe I'll just quickly say that the project I talked to you about today, our team is comprised of people who were and are involved in that community, and you know, loosely defined by all sorts of different ways. We're beginning by asking questions to find the artwork, which is kind of a funny thing to have to do through COVID. We have to find work that hangs on walls of places we can't quite visit just yet, but I can't speak too much to this at this point, but it'll be something that we'll share about the project as it progresses. So
Great.
we'll leave it there.
Leanne, did you want the last word?
No, I think that Danny and Suzanne have done a great job. I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Well, we've come to the end of our time. I mean, I swear I blinked and missed it. I wish we could get together every Monday evening and continue this and maybe add some other aspects to it. But thank you all so, so much for sharing your ideas, your time. It's been lovely. And thank you to all of the participants who came. I think we had about 155 people connected listening tonight. And we did record it. So if anybody wants to go back and listen, that can be accessed at QAG's YouTube channel. Thank you very much. A big round of applause. I think they can only hear me though. Have a nice evening. Thank you all.
Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.